Well, hello, and welcome to that thing we like to call Curlis Mania, where we talk all things pop, rock, and prog. Today we are talking Genesis, which, come on, one of my favorite topics ever. I always say this all the time, but probably my favorite band when really the rubber hits the road is Genesis. But before we talk anything more, I'd like to introduce on his debut on the channel, Mr. Matt Brown. How are you, Matt?
Hey, hi Tom. I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. We met on Cody's channel, Cody Brockway's Vinyl Bites. We had a little discussion on a couple of what did we do? We did Pink Floyd one time, didn't
Yeah,
we?
I think we did Floyd once, and maybe there was one other. Did we do a Genesis
We
panel? I
may have
can't.
done Genesis too. I can't remember.
Yeah, there was definitely a Floyd panel. I do remember that for sure.
We did Floyd together, and I think we may have done like a Genesis solo, maybe. Was that right?
Yeah, you know what? It was like picking your five favorite solo albums.
Yes, yes. So anyway, Matt and I hit it off. I was like, I love that guy. He's great. I love, and so I was like, you gotta have him, I gotta have him on my channel. So I invited him on, and thankfully he said yes. So we are
Yay.
here to talk about two amazing live records. We got um Genesis Seconds Out from 1977. If I can get that in focus somehow.
Yep.
Yep. And then against, because I always do these battles, this is another battle. Here we go against the next live album that came out on the shelves, which was Three Sides Live from 1982, right? Right? 82? Yes, 82. So, so yes. So what about, I mean, this is going to be so hard because these are both incredible. And so I would ask you, Matt, before we get going on this and getting formal stuff,
Okay.
let's talk
Okay.
about when was the first time you heard, for example, let's take Seconds Out. When was the first time you heard Seconds Out? Do you remember?
I vaguely do. I went through a phase where I started collecting all the albums, and it started really like at the end of 1986. From say October, November of 86 into the summer of 1987, I would just save up my bread and pick up the albums or the CDs when I could, of the entire catalog. Earlier on, I had some of the more obvious things, but um, as it turns out, Seconds Out, my friends had it before I did. I had two other buddies in high school. We were all really into Genesis, and in an effort to hear everything, we all bought different records and we would just trade them.
Hmm.
And I remember my friend Steve bought Seconds Out, and I probably heard it at his place sometime in the spring of 1987. And I didn't get my own copy, I don't think, until that summer.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so it had to have been around then. I would say, like, I would have been I would have been 16 at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been sometime 7.
Yeah, no, I think my experience is very similar. I think it was like you get to the point where you're a fan and then you start going, okay, wait a minute, I think I want everything now. So you, like you
Yep.
said, you start going backwards and collecting. I had to go backwards and collect all the stuff from the 70s, basically. And
Same.
and same thing. Where I had a buddy who was a prog buddy. Like it was like the one guy, one or two guys that loved prog rock, right? So you're always talking about, hey, what's the? Do you have this? Do you have this live album? Do you have that one? Or and then you'd like tape stuff like, hey, I'll give you some cassette. I'll give you some Maxell XL90s. You can fill this up, man. You know, that kind
Yep.
of. I remember doing that too. Because he would have one album and I'd have another, and we'd tape each other's out, so we'd have all of it. So. Um,
Right.
you know, but so that's kind of my memory of Seconds Out was kind of finding it like to your point later. It was probably in the mid 80s as well, maybe 85, 86, something like that. Um, but I was pretty aware of Three Sides Live right when it came out because I was already a pretty big fan of Abacab. So I was like already I was in when that came out.
I kind of was too. I mean, the first Genesis record, I should probably preface this by saying that, I collected 45s for most of my early kid years. And
Mhm.
probably around 182, I started really switching over to buying LPs. It was also the same time that I kind of switched from AM radio to FM radio.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
people who are younger than us aren't going to understand
They don't understand any of
that.
this, right?
But if you're born after a certain year, you get it.
Mm.
But and I remember, 81, 82 was like my kind of big, oh my God, there's rock and roll on FM, and it's all really great. And where have I been?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was aware of Abacab, and I was aware of the songs on Duke and stuff. So I think I actually became aware of Three Sides Live mostly because of the studio tracks.
Right,
Um, because
right.
particularly Paper Late, and you might recall, were getting airplay.
Mhm.
And um, the first Genesis record I actually bought was the next one, which was the Mama record, right?
Right,
But
83, yeah, yep.
by that time, our household had MTV, and back then MTV used to play a lot of concerts.
Mhm.
So I was recording videos like mad. We had a VHS,
VHS, yep.
and so anytime they would air concerts, I would start taping them. And they used to play the Three Sides Live concert pretty regularly.
Mhm,
So I actually became familiar with the album through the video, really, initially.
mhm,
And once I started going completely gaga about wanting to collect Genesis's entire library, that was one of the first ones I wanted. And
mhm.
um, I think, if I remember correctly, most of the first Genesis CDs were not available in America. They were all imports. And I think in the early part of like the winter of 86, 87, they released Three Sides Live and Wind and Wuthering and a couple other on CD in America. You could get them as imports, but uh, they were, $25 for a single and $50 for a double.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was kind of out of the question. But
Yeah.
I I remember buying my first copy of Three Sides Live at that point, and already basically knowing it because I pretty much memorized the video.
Yeah,
So
yes, exactly. Right, and I've got the Blu-ray of that somewhere. I couldn't find it. I'm gonna like dub that in at the very end and be like, here it is, because
yeah,
I got it somewhere around here in this house, but it's I still enjoy it, and I do remember seeing it also like pieces of it. I don't know if I saw it all, but I saw pieces of it back in the day. And just remember thinking how exciting they looked. They seemed in concert, and they just did an amazing. They were so good live, and you're just like, wow, this is just, just seeing little clips of it was like, yes, this band is awesome, you know?
yeah, yeah. I had the same reaction, and during that period of time when Three Sides Live was new, I think I was mostly listening to a lot of hard rock and a lot of metal and maybe a fair amount of kind of new wave-ish type of music.
Mhm.
And I liked the singles from those bands, pretty much straight away. And I think in a way, like later finding out that, uh, for example, like later finding out that Steve Harris from Iron Maiden was a big early Genesis fan, and I was
Mhm.
a Maiden guy, especially in those days.
Yep.
So really took the deep dive into Genesis. I was like, wait a minute, maybe I'm crazy, but I can hear the link. I can hear the through line, you
Mhm.
know.
There's
And
something here. Yep.
yeah, there was definitely something there that obviously I could hear where Steve was influenced by them. And so that was kind of exciting. It was like, oh,
Mhm.
cool. All right. Maybe Maiden were my gateway drug to prog rock without even realizing.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, Maiden has that. It's almost like a heavier, I mean, they do have times where you feel like, wow, this could be like heavy prog, you
yeah,
know?
precisely. Precisely.
You know?
So it was, 82. I mean, back in those days, I worked at a record store under the table as a young kid. Our little town had a record store, and I had somehow ingratiated myself to their staff. And they used to pay me in store credit, but they also used to let me take home the returns, like when albums would be returned because there was
Oh,
a skip.
nice,
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
So I would tape the songs I liked until I could afford to buy them.
Right,
And
right.
I remember
Yes.
bringing Three Sides Live home specifically so I could get the fourth side. And I don't know if I listened to the other three sides at that time, but eventually I was like, I just gotta, and I was swept away basically. So
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I was as well. So, we're gonna
yeah,
get more into that in a minute. But
cool.
so let's do this battle. Let's start this official battle. So again, Seconds Out versus Three Sides Live. We'll start with Seconds Out, and I'm just gonna do a quick rundown. So,
Okay,
Seconds Out was their second live record. The first was in 1973 with Peter Gabriel. It was a single record.
right.
Genesis Live, which is also excellent, by the way. Yes, there it is. There it is. Love the
Here's this.
inside cover.
Yeah, the gatefold is so beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful. Um, so it was released October 14th, 1977. It's their first album with Chester Thompson on drums, who was formerly with Weather Report and Frank Zappa. Phil had heard him on the live record Roxy and Elsewhere, and was like, and also saw him with Weather Report, and was like, that guy could be the drummer for Genesis. Sure enough, he ended up being the drummer for Genesis for 30, 25 years, something like that. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
Crazy. And it's also the last with Steve Hackett, sadly. The last official record with him in the band. It's also a first with Phil as lead vocalist, first live record with Phil singing. It was recorded at the Palais des Sports in Paris, France, during the Wind and Wuthering tour in 1977. In 1976 and 7, I think is kind of that it kind of went a pretty long time. Cinema Show was recorded in 1976 at the Apollo in Glasgow with Bill Bruford on drums. So Bill Bruford does appear on this record on one track, Cinema Show. It was number 4 in the UK and number 47 in the United States at the time. Amazing sound on this record. They really took their time and made sure that they captured the sound correctly, which I just think it sounds amazing. Good sign for Phil as a lead vocalist. I mean, he does a great job on this record. He felt that the 77 shows were stronger, because I guess they did tape a bunch of 76 shows, but they ended up going more with the 77 shows because apparently those were more consistent or stronger generally across the board. So that's my rundown on Seconds Out. What's your take on this record, Matt?
Well, I mean, it is, justifiably a classic. It sounds immaculate. The performances are amazing. Um, I have a bit of probably an unfair, I don't want to call it a prejudice, but I have a bit of an unfair bias kind of almost against this record, even though it's so good.
Mhm.
And I think that is probably because of the time in which I got into the music. Um, Phil's been a favorite of mine for so many years, probably since 1980, 81. And that said, hearing him he does a wonderful job with all the Gabriel era stuff. The trouble is, by the time I heard this album, I'd already heard Foxtrot and the Lamb and Selling England and Nursery Crime. So it was, and I can imagine maybe people who were older than me and you that were into Genesis in the 70s might have had that take as well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I too had to kind of, how do I say it? I had to appreciate it on its merits. I mean, he does an amazing job with these songs. And, Phil is such a passionate singer.
Right.
Even in those early times when he was still learning about how his voice worked and gaining confidence, you can still hear the power that he has and that he is going to, harness later on.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's one of those records that I have listened to a ton, but it occurs to me that I haven't listened to it as much as some of the others. And that includes, interestingly enough, bootlegs from the same era.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Like Hammersmith Show from 1976 and
Right.
Earl's Court and Zurich from 1977.
Correct.
These
Yeah, exactly.
are
Yeah.
all killer documents of this band.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I can't like I can't say anything really negative about Seconds Out because it's wonderful.
Okay.
Um, there are times when I wish that a couple more Women Weathering songs were on it, though.
Yes, I have the same thought. It's funny when because I was like listening to this back and just doing homework for this episode, and I'm like, the only Wind and Wuthering song is Afterglow. That's it. And
Mhm.
this was the album they were touring. It's like it's kind of bizarre in a way.
It is strange, and yeah, I had the same thought. Like, what about? I mean, One for the Vine was a powerhouse on that tour.
Yeah.
House's Night, Quiet Earth, 11th Earl, those were all in the set list, and it's like, and Your Own Special Way too. So, I know I found that to be a little bit strange too, and
That's why those bootlegs are so valuable, right? You want to hear those songs.
exactly. And here, well, God, I mean, the rest of it sounded so good. What did those songs sound like?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, in the '90s in particular, when the CD bootleg boom really hit, I went nuts, picking up whatever I could find, whatever I could afford
Right.
from Genesis and from other bands, and it was a great opportunity to finally hear what those other shows and the other songs from those tours finally sounded like. So
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of wonder too, because I mean, it really feels Seconds Out. This is another thought that I had when I was listening to this record again and kind
mhm,
of putting my analytical head, not just enjoying it, but trying to analyze a little bit too. And that is, it feels like a huge summation of the Gabriel era, right? I mean, there's a lot of Trick of the Tail on here too. Don't get me wrong.
yeah,
'Cause, with Dance on a Volcano, Los Endos, Squonk, there's a lot of Trick of the Tail on here too, but there's a lot of Gabriel stuff on it too. And I think that there's sort of like this. Our first album was a single record. We didn't get Sepper's Ready on that album. So we got to put Sepper's Ready on the live album. We'll do a double and we'll put Sepper's Ready on it. And it
right.
kind of feels like they really concentrate. There's it seems like there's just a ton of Gabriel era, classic Gabriel era stuff on this.
I totally agree.
You
I
know?
often do if knowing that Steve was unhappy, knowing that he was going to be leaving. Um, apparently he quit the band during the mixing of this live album, and I'll often wonder too if some of their thought process was a bit symbolic, as if, okay, we're now losing, we've lost Gabriel, now we're losing Steve. There's probably big changes on the horizon. Maybe we're going to wind up doing something quite different next. Because, and I say that just because of the way this album kind of, it's almost like a greatest hits of the mid '70s in a
Right.
strange way,
Right.
like a greatest hits live of the mid '70s. And I don't know if they were thinking that at all, but I can't help but sometimes wonder about that. If they were thinking, because and you look at what happened after that, right? And then there were three, Duke, et cetera, starting to really, take their music in different directions. And so sometimes I wonder if there was a conscious or subconscious thing about that. In addition, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying about, yeah, we didn't have Suppers Ready on the first record. We don't have a live for the fifth yet. We don't have a live cinema show yet.
Yes.
We should
Yes.
do this,
Mm.
and then I've always hoped, I really had hoped that Genesis would follow in the footsteps of some of the other bands that have done um, deluxe editions of their records. I would love to see a deluxe edition of this album, which featured the entire Paris show and the entire Glasgow show, for
Oh,
example.
you and me both.
Can you
I would,
imagine, like,
I would
and
buy that
everybody,
in a heartbeat.
oh God, me too,
Yeah.
without hesitation.
Wouldn't
And
hesitate. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that would provide a really neat way to show. I mean, diehards know already because we've collected the bootlegs, but to have an official document of
Oh,
those
be so
as they
nice.
happen,
Yeah,
you know,
that would be so nice. Please, whoever's running the Genesis estate, please.
I know, right?
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Um,
So who
because
knows?
because like we said, I mean, as much as we love this record, it sounds like it's just it does feel a little bit flawed in that way. That it's not representing. I mean, those shows in '76 were probably taped, right? They're probably all on tape somewhere.
Yeah,
Um, and the one and you mentioned the Hackett thing. I had to tell the story about Phil Collins saw him on the street apparently and said, "Hey man," like they were mixing the record, mixing the live album, and he saw
right.
him heading to the studio, and he said, "Hey, jump in, where I'm going to the studio." And Steve's like, "Hey, good to see you. No, I'm not right now. I'm like he was like like he was acting really weird, like not right now or something." And Phil's like, "What are you talking about?" And then he got to the studio, and they're like, "Haven't you heard? Steve quit." He's like, "What?"
Yeah.
You know.
Quite a story. I know.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
Oh,
then what I didn't realize for the longest time, I used to think Seconds Out was like, I thought it was like, like the second encore, like, because they have a picture of them playing live. And I thought it meant like,
right.
we're out of here after the second encore or something like that. I didn't know what it meant. And then realized it's seconds, the second person left from the band.
That
Hackett
makes
out.
sense.
Yeah, Hackett left. So the second person is out of the band. Um,
Well,
and I was like, oh, I didn't know that until like years later. Like it's kind of a jokey title.
yeah,
So anyway, because Genesis always does that. They don't want to be thought of as being taken too serious, taking themselves too seriously. So they kind of do jokey things here and there. Every
yeah,
ELP does that too, right? ELP does all these jokey songs on their albums, and are you ready
yeah,
yet and all that. Um,
yeah. Trying to, they have a sense of humor, which
we're not
they
that
absolutely,
serious.
you know, we just look serious.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, one thing I was going to say about this too is, I do think that the Trick of the Tail stuff sounds fantastic on this record. I do like, I think that Volcano and Los Andos and Squonk and Robbery Assault and I think there's a lot of great, they sound amazing on this, because and then also the one thing I was going to mention before I forget is that listening to Supper's Ready on this, I
Mhm.
do miss Peter a little bit. Like, as Phil does a bang up job, he does a great job. He does the best to his ability, and he sings it actually very melodic. It's very melodic the way he does it. He does his own style, right? But
Yeah,
I kind of miss the Peter Gabriel, like all trains, and like he does like all these, when he does it, he's like yelling stuff and screaming and kind of really theatrical vibe, and Phil's just like, what's there's one part in particular that I was like, oh, Peter does this differently, and I kind of like
yeah.
when Peter does it. I can't remember what it is, but
Well, Willow Farm in particular is
Willow
super.
Farm, that's it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially when and
used to
it's
be a plastic bag on a drag or whatever.
right, exactly. It's just like it's outlandish and kind of like a carnival barker or something. And Phil, he tones that down a bit. Obviously, that's not his style. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, that was, I fell in love with Supper's Ready because of Foxtrot and because of the often bootlegged Rainbow Theater show from the Selling England tour.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's my favorite Supper's Ready, actually. That one,
it's
even
pretty
more,
killer. Yeah.
because it's got the balls, it's got the energy, it's got the majesty, and the Seconds Out version does have all that too. Obviously, it's a few years on, and the band's matured a bit, uh,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have Peter, so it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like depending on what kind of mood you're in, you can choose which version I guess you'd want to play. But I'm
Hmm.
right with you on that. It's like, and then I think about some of the other songs. I mean, I love the versions of Firth the Fifth and Cinema Show on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just so powerful. And I mean, and I'm a huge fan of the Selling England album as it is, but everything shines on here. But you're right. With some of the things with Peter, he just had that, his personality and his way of delivering and his way of doing it.
Hmm.
Yeah, you do miss it a little bit.
You
I
missed it a
definitely, I,
little, a little bit. And then, like he said, that when he went to go see Genesis when they were touring for this, maybe it was this tour, I don't know. But when he went to go see them live, he said it was a little odd being in the crowd watching this band that he used to be in. And
right.
he said Phil did of course he was very complimentary. He said they sounded great and Phil did an amazing job. He said, but it felt a little bit like Phil was playing a part, whereas like I wasn't really playing a part. It was part of me, whereas he was kind of he was like an actor playing a part a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, anytime you're going to be covering someone else's song, even if you make it your own, there is an element of that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
So,
Phil, since Phil acting background, I guess it kind of stands to reason.
Yes,
But
exactly, right. You put that to good use. So,
yeah,
but yeah, but ultimately though, you're right. I mean, there, I feel like I'm complaining about this record, and it's awesome. I mean, there's nothing like
I,
people are going to be like, "Are you complaining about Seconds Out?" I mean, like you said, cinema show. Oh my God, the instrumentally just out of this world.
yeah,
Musical box, like you said. Oh, I mean, and the Lamb. I love the version of Lamb on this too. The Lamb Lies Down is
oh,
they
it's
do. Great. Oh, I mean, they're so good live. They're such a great live band that they just it's I'm all my complaining is very much minor quibbling. It's not major
yeah.
complaints.
I feel very much the same way. I think it's a matter of like it's a matter of if you want to call them complaints, it's because we're fans of the whole output.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I know people are going to be in the comments going, "What are you're bitching about Seconds Out? What are you talking about?" You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. We're
it's
just talking, people. It doesn't.
it's like
We're huge fans here.
it's lighthearted. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
we're huge fans. We're not, this is amazing. I mean, this record is awesome. I love it. I love it to death. We're just like you said, we're like super fans saying, "Oh, I wish other songs were on here." Like it's almost like it kind of reminds me of like, when I went to see Paul McCartney and he played like so much Beatles and I was like, "Where are the Wings songs, man?" Like like
yeah.
I'm a huge fan. I like the Wings stuff too, you know?
Yeah, same here. I know that, and that's the thing, you really into an artist, and if you're really into their entire or most of their career arc, those quibbles are going to come up. It's just inevitable.
Yeah, and this is what fans do. We talk about this stuff. This is what we
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
So Uh,
exactly.
but overall, it's an excellent live record. And it is a great kind of for the time a summation of sort of, the with along with the recent stuff that they were doing, a great summation of the 70s. And like you said, I was going to say earlier that you mentioned something which I thought was great and kind of maybe true that in a subconscious level that maybe like Rush used to do, where they would do like 3 records and then do a live album, or they do like, and that would be like the end of that chapter. You
Right,
know, you know,
right.
all the world's a stage is the end of that chapter. Then exit stage left is the end of that chapter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I wonder.
So
I mean, it very well could have been conscious. I'm not sure, but
who
yeah,
knows? Who
that's
knows?
same wavelength.
Yes, yes, I think you're absolutely right. So yeah, Seconds Out, amazing. Anything else? Anything more to say about it? Before we
um,
move on?
I don't know. Uh, Rhino, Atlantic, Virgin, Charisma, whoever's out there listening, do a deluxe edition of this record. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, couldn't
I,
agree more, Matt.
I actually have the remix vinyl in addition to the original mix, and I've heard part of it. I haven't sat down and listened to the whole thing yet. Um, and the remix is actually quite good. I was really critical of the remixes, but the live records are pretty damn good, I gotta say.
Are they
Uh,
okay? Okay.
yeah, yeah. I thought the compression and some of the limiting was a little too much on some of the studio recordings, but the I've sat down mostly with side one of the remix of Seconds Out, and it sounds amazing. It really does. Um, so yeah, let's have more of that. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Deluxe edition with wind and wuthering tracks. Let's
come
go.
on, yeah, whole shows. Let's do it.
Let's go. Oh my God. Like I said, I'd just be like, take my credit card. Here it
Yeah.
is. Just
I
take
mean,
it.
being a fan of King Crimson, being a fan of the Grateful Dead, and being a fan of some of these other bands who have gone more into their archives. Um,
Yes.
yeah, let's do this. Let's do full shows. Let's
Mm.
let's beat the bootleggers. I really wish that Genesis would follow suit. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they did these, these sort of, these little archive sets, but which are fun and are
yeah,
great. And I thought the second one could have been so much better. Like this one, I love. Uh,
yeah,
this has the live. Since you were talking, I wasn't going to bring this up, but since we're talking about it, this has a version of Lamb Lies Down on it, which is just incredible to hear Phil playing drums on the whole thing. I just love that Phil by himself is playing drums,
yeah,
and it's so raw. And I mean, of course, Peter redid a lot of his vocals, but it doesn't matter. It's still great. Um, and but I just thought on the volume 2 they could have done what you're talking about. They could have had like full shows. They did like a smattering of live stuff on one of the discs, but it wasn't. It was like do a full show or something from '77 or something. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I know they just put out the BBC sessions that BBC bought last year, and
Mhm.
it it goes a little bit of a way towards correcting that particular issue because it's got most of the 1980 London show on there, and it's got
Oh, okay,
Wem-
okay.
most of Wembley '87 is on there, and um. But that said, yeah, there's so I mean, it's so obvious that there's so much more involved, you
Yeah,
know.
there's a lot more. There's a lot more. So, anyway, coming from true fans, diehard fans, people. All
That's
right. Okay. All right. Let's move on to Three Sides Live. I'm going to do a quick rundown like I did earlier. So,
okay.
this is the third live LP, another double record. Released June 4th, 1982. This is a different time. Charisma in the UK and Atlantic in the United States. This was the tour for Abacab, which ended in December of 1981. The UK edition has 4 sides live. The whole thing is live. We'll talk more about that later. But the US edition has studio tracks, which was the tracks that were recorded originally for Abacab, and there were 2, I think, from Duke, from the Duke sessions. So you get more from Abacab and Duke at the very end of that record.
Right.
Um, I remember I did buy the 3x3 EP back in the day. I did have that. I don't think I own it anymore. I was digging all over the place. I don't know if I still have it. I wish I did.
Yeah.
It has Paper Laid on it, and you might recall, and me and Virgil, I think, I something like
Hmm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So also released was the film we talked about earlier, the live film Three Sides Live, which I do own somewhere, and I'll show at the end.
Yep.
Um, and these were shows that were recorded in November and December of 1981, essentially, in the USA and Europe. I think some of them were in like New York, and I don't know. I can't. There was
Yeah.
specific.
I
Yeah. Right.
I remember correctly for the most of the Abacab shows were like the Savoy Theater in New York City and Nassau Coliseum. I'm
Nassau. That's it. Yes.
pretty
Nassau.
sure 2 shows they pulled just about everything from the first 3 sides from.
Yeah.
Although um, I later found out that "Follow You, Follow Me" is actually from a Duke show.
Oh, is it? Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It might be from the um, oh God, the Drury Lane show. I forget which one that the one that was videoed. I think it
Right.
might be from that
Might
run.
be from that. Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
great show too, by the way.
yeah, it is, and that's the nice thing about that BBC collection coming to pass because it's got the majority of that show. It's missing maybe 3 songs,
Hmm.
um, but the
Right.
there. So
Yeah. That's great. I love that show. He talks about the Duke suite. You know, he mentions he does this huge long introduction from about Duke.
yeah,
It's great, you know. Um, but anyway, what was your so you do remember we talked about this a little bit. You do remember this coming out at the time.
I do. I
Okay.
remember. I remember, radio being American radio in particular being all over Paper Late, and you might recall. I mean,
Mm.
um, I remember that coming out as a single. I think I probably bought it at the time, or shortly thereafter, and I just remember, the combination of hearing it and watching it being completely overwhelming. Like
Mhm.
watching them do Dodo into Abacab and then behind the lines into Duchess and the whole Cage and medley into Afterglow. Just sitting there with my jaw on the floor. It was one thing to hear it. It was a whole other thing to watch it. Just
Yeah.
and the combination of the band playing and of course the light show.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
like,
at the time that was a huge deal. That was like new
yeah,
technology. Yeah.
pretty pioneering for the
Yeah.
era.
Mm.
Um, so most of my memories of the album are really wrapped up in watching the concert and then you know eventually purchasing it on vinyl or purchasing it on CD in this case so I could take it with me.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
mean, and eventually I got both copies.
Yep, there you go.
I got the copy with, you know, on vinyl too, both LPs.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, the UK version and the US version, just to track everything down. Um,
Yeah,
mhm.
I've got this is the version with the UK version, right, basically.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know if this is going to show up. The first edition of the CD, this is so geeky. I love it. The first editions of the CD actually had a misprint. See if you can spot it.
Oh God, I can't read it.
Well, they mistyped Afterglow.
Oh, did they?
It
Yeah.
actually said Afterflow. Like, what the hell is that?
Afterflow. Oh my God.
Later on, but yeah, I was like, wait, what? You know,
Is
but
that a different song?
yeah, is this a new tune? What's the
Yeah.
deal? Anyway, that was yeah, I had to collect again, being, you know, blessed or cursed with the collector's curse. It was like, I gotta have them all, you know.
Collectors. No, I'm the same way. I was like, I had to have it, right? You have to have both. You got to get both because it's like,
Yeah.
when you hear there's a different version with more live stuff, you're like, oh, I gotta have that.
Yeah.
You know.
When you first heard that fourth side, what did you think?
You know, I when my first you're talking about first impressions. My first impression
Yeah.
was it felt a little bit out of place. That was
Yeah.
my first, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was like, this doesn't feel like the other tracks. And it's sure enough, I think they're like different tours and stuff. I don't know.
They are. Fountain of Salmacis is from the 78 tour, and One for the Vine is from the Duke tour, and the It Watcher of the Skies medley was like the closing tune before the, I think before the encore, or might have even been the encore song from the 76 tour.
Yeah,
So
and he says see ya, because at the end of it, he says see ya. So
yeah,
it must
yes,
be the end of the concert.
probably was the end of the show proper. I
Yeah.
think if I remember correctly, looking at bootlegs and stuff, that was how they ended it too. But yeah, it does feel just disjointed in that way, as far as being separate from the rest of the album. And it makes me think that, especially, they said the cover was basically kind of a nod to the bootleggers. It was meant to be kind of, you know, lo-fi
Oh,
looking.
got it. Like look bootleggish. Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
The
And so
handwriting and yeah.
maybe they thought for the UK, you know, especially since a lot of bootlegs sometimes would have a fourth side that had nothing to do with the previous three sides.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
a good point. That's a really good point.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing here, but
That's a good point.
very well could have been the case.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I love I mean, One for the Vine, Fountain of Salmacis, and I mean, I love all the songs.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I love all those songs, especially Fountain of Salmacis.
Yeah.
But the Watcher of the Skies is a little strange because, I want to hear Watcher of the Skies as its own track. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
uh,
cool how they rearranged it, but yeah, you're missing this massive chunk, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's just yeah, exactly. And and usually they do like medleys really well, which we'll talk about, but
Yeah.
that one feels a little clunky for some reason. Um but anyway, I'm again, we're here we go ripping on it again. I just, I love Genesis people. I swear to God, I love 'em.
We wouldn't say this if we didn't care. That's how I like to.
Exactly, exactly. So, but the rest of the live stuff,
Hmm.
flipping amazing. I love the live stuff on this album. Love it.
Me too.
So here we go. Now I can start gushing because I,
Okay.
to me, some of this. What do you think? My opinion, some of these tracks are like the definitive almost versions of these tracks because they're so energetic, they're so tight, and it's just like, man, they are killing it.
I agree. I mean, I think inversely, I think I mentioned before that I'd gotten into the studio records of the 70s stuff before hearing Seconds Out.
Mhm.
And so those are my go-to versions. Even though I had heard the Duke and the Abacab record a lot and heard these songs a lot, by the time I'd heard all of the Three Sides Live records, I a lot of cases prefer these versions too. I mean, the studio versions are great, but yeah, the energy, the passion, just the fire that's there in those verses. Me and Sarah Jane, especially the Abacab stuff.
Oh yeah, the Abacab stuff
Oh,
for sure.
yeah, really, really powerful. And Phil had been criticized in some circles for maybe over singing at some points in their career.
Hmm.
Which on the one hand, I was like, what are you talking about? But I can kind of hear where people are coming from with that viewpoint, although I don't share it.
Right.
Um, Afterglow on this is definitive for me.
Oh,
This is definitive for me. They're just so smoking, and
yeah.
I've actually used those tracks to turn people on to earlier Genesis, and they,
Yeah.
oh, I've heard blah blah blah, and I've heard the solo Phil stuff. Okay, you got to hear this. You're not
Yeah.
going to believe this. And
Yeah.
then they're like, oh, I want more of that. Where do I go? And they're down the rabbit hole they go.
Yeah. I mean, that whole In the Cage medley into Afterglow, it's like imprinted in my mind. I just absolutely love it. Every moment of it. Because I was talking about maybe the clunkiness of the it into Watcher. There's no clunkiness on here. It's tight, and they just go one into it flows, and the drumming and the ensemble playing on that whole thing just blows my mind. Every time I hear it, I can't. I just turn it up, and it's like I can't. I love it. I don't know what to
Yeah.
say. I love it.
No, it's tremendous. I know. I agree. And I mean, Duke is one of my all-time favorite Genesis records. Um, that said, I mean, the behind the lines and Duchess on here are fantastic.
Oh,
You know, there's
yes.
that studio version that just is almost sacrosanct, but these are freaking great.
Yeah, the behind the lines has so much fire,
Yeah, big time.
you know. I
Big
mean,
time.
it's just man. And then me and Sarah Jane. I mean, just like you said, all the Abacab stuff. Just I don't know what it is about the live versions. They just have a little bit more fire to them or something.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. It's great. I mean, Dodo like has that sinister vibe, and the way
Yeah.
they jam out on Abacab. Like, I mean, the Genesis tribute that I play with, we only play maybe once a year these days. And we mostly concentrate on the Gabriel era. I call it the Hackett era, really, because most of our set list is derived from that period. But
Mhm.
we'll to the 78 to 84 period too. And Abacab and Dodo are like two of our favorite songs to play. Particularly the Abacab jam, just because it just cooks.
Yeah, yeah, that jam on at the end. Yeah, of
Yeah,
Abacab.
it just cooks. It's so much fun to it just you kind of get swept up in the energy. And we've noticed that most of the people who come to see us, we know their tastes. That's partly how our set is chosen, but we've also figured out which songs they really like.
Mhm.
And we do that one pretty well, so they like that one.
You guys use the bass. Isn't it like a bass pedal that
Mhm.
it's just like it's
Yeah,
like a
there's yeah. And then the back and forth between the drums and the keys and the lead guitar. There's it's just a fun thing to play. It's
people get into it. People get into it. Yeah.
and Abacab was such a departure from the previous records, and a lot of people couldn't get used to how different it was, and that's legit. Um,
It was very different. It really was.
yeah,
Yeah.
but live it just exploded. I
It
mean,
cooked. It cooked.
no doubt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I can't, I really can't fault the live stuff on this record at all. And it's sentimental too for me. I never forget buying this record. I went down, I had enough money for my own. I think I was like 11 or 12 or something. I don't know. I like raked leaves to get money and went down to like this. You used to, again, these certain people won't know what we're talking about, but there were literally like it was like a drugstore that had like a little vinyl section. Like it was like back in the day, you'd go to like certain places that have albums. And you're like, oh my God, they got records here, sweet. And
yep,
and I remember I have a very clear memory of like seeing it on the shelf and being so excited because by this point I was a Genesis fan by this point,
yeah.
and still early on, but I was into them, and I saw the album and I was like, oh my God, oh I can't, I couldn't wait to buy it, couldn't wait to get it home, you know. and listen to it. And so it's a lot of sentimental stuff going on for me. And I bought the Paper Late 3x3 thing too. I had that too. So there you go.
Yeah,
Um,
very
yeah,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
I want to talk about You Might Recall for a minute.
yeah, yeah. Let's do it.
You know, I mean, the fourth side in the US, which had all the outtakes, the extra songs, um, you know, I like them all and love them all to varying degrees. The two Duke tracks are beautiful. Me and Virgil is a really interesting kind of a left turn, you
It
know.
is. Yeah.
Paper,
Yes.
but You Might Recall, man, that's one of my all-time favorite Genesis songs, period.
Same here.
Any era, and it doesn't matter. That song just, oh my God. That really had an impact on me even back then. And it still does to this day. And I get it, you know, Ahmet Ertegun basically said to Genesis, you know, do some different things on this record. You know, he was basically the reason why Who Done It made the cut, from what I understand. On the
Right. Right. Yeah.
but and okay, I get it, I understand, but to leave that song off in favor of it, I mean, assuming that's what they did, it just doesn't add up. I'm sorry, it doesn't add
It
up.
doesn't. It doesn't. And that's always been like for me. It's like I always have that thought too. I'm like, okay, how how did this song not make the cut? Like this is
Yeah.
a killer track, and it could have made Abacab even that much stronger.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean,
You know?
I think their original intent was for Abacab to be a longer album, like maybe a two record set, because they had recorded like Naminanu and Submarine, and there was a lot of.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
maybe they were thinking, okay, well, you know, it'll be with that. Obviously, they didn't go that route. Um, I mean, I'm such a fan of this record that I created my own deluxe edition of it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It's called from both albums, plus the Archive 2 set, and from King Biscuit's show. So I could get, and from a couple other sources to get the missing tracks. Firth of Fifth, Dance on the Volcano, Los Endos, No Reply at All, Man on the Corner. Um, I mean, it's disjointed because I'm not I'm not tech savvy enough to do crossfades and stuff. I just want
Right. Right.
real time. And but when I play it, that's the version I play. It's got all this, as many songs as were professionally recorded. So
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, that's a great idea is to have Abacab plus, like you said, Nami Nanu, Submarine, You Might Recall, Paper Late, and
me and
then in V and Virgil, right? That's another Abacab track.
and then the stuff for the live album, including the rest of what's available from the Nassau show and from the Savoy show, and just to kind of cobble together something that more closely resembles what the actual show was like.
Right. Right.
You know,
And Submarine's a really experimental track too. It's kind of like slowed down or something. It's kind of
yeah,
weird, you
it's
know?
it's very cool. I mean, all that stuff's got a lot of interesting bits to them. You know, so
Yeah, and Nami Nanu is almost like a Brand X track or something. You know, in a vibe in a weird vibe. It's kind of but what do
yeah,
you think of so another song though that like you mentioned me and Virgil or you might recall, which couldn't agree more. I think it's a fantastic song.
right,
I love it, absolutely love it. Can't believe it didn't make the cut. Totally with you. I also Evidence of Autumn to me is like that's another crackerjack track. Like I love that.
totally,
Isn't that the one that's the girl with all those songs?
yep,
Oh my God, I just
yeah.
love that track.
That's a gorgeous song. I know. I'm amazed that didn't make Duke. I mean, I know it was released as a B-side at the time. I think I started to do during those years of collecting. I've always collected singles, but I started to look for the weird Genesis singles too. And I do have Evidence of Autumn as a UK B-side to something, maybe Duchess, or I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it's a B-side of something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that completely. It's such a fantastic record. I mean, Duke was already super long, but that's yeah. I wish that had been on there too.
Yeah, there's something magical about Genesis during these early 80s times. Like, I don't know what it is, but for me personally, and maybe it was just when it hit me because I was 12 years old or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, who knows? But I just think there's something that they just did a lot of great material with Duke and Abacab. And even, and especially, and I would even include the self-titled album in there.
Me too. I mean, that self-titled album really was, that was the first full album I ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard a lot of individual songs along the way. And I still love that record. I mean, I think it's more than just a sentimental favorite. The writing is strong, the songs hold up.
They do. They do.
And that goes for, I mean, that's the thing that kind of always distinguished Genesis anyway from a lot of the other bands that they get lumped in with, is that they were a songwriters band. They were a songwriters collective. They experimented with song form, and a lot of the other bands did too, but they were really, really tied into that. Clearly, songwriting was more important than the technical virtuosic aspect,
Yeah.
Clearly,
And I think they realized that as their career went on. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think in a way, that I think that makes their catalog hold up even better, because the attention to detail in songs was there. Even the songs that they're not particularly crazy about.
Right.
You can tell a lot went into them. Like nothing was ever just tossed off. At least I don't get that impression.
No, that's a great point. Really well said. I mean, everything was crafted, everything was thought about, everything was worked on pretty hard.
Yeah.
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 You can tell. Yeah, there's no tossed off songs in Genesis catalog, really, in my opinion. They always made sure it was done right. So what we're getting off on it, which is so much fun. I'm loving this conversation. So what we got to get down to brass tacks though, because it's getting late. So when it comes down to it, between these two records, between Seconds Out, I'm going to grab the CDs this time. Seconds Out and Three Sides Live. It's a tough live battle. 2 live double albums from amazing live bands.
Yeah.
Amazing live band.
Right.
What do you think you'd go with if you had to put it on the table?
It is so hard, because they both are strong in some similar ways, but in very different ways. But I got to go with the one I play more often. That's really what it comes down to for me. And I play guys live more often, which doesn't take anything away. It's sort of like a Sophie's Choice situation here, but because that was freaking brilliant, and a lot of people are like, "What are you talking about?" But for me, that's the one, And before the live Rainbow '73 show was released officially, it was my favorite Genesis live record. That supplanted it, but yeah, TSL that's my go-to. But between these two, and I say that with all the love and respect for the Seconds Out record and for those tours, because it's wonderful too.
Yeah, yep. No, and Matt, I'm completely in agreement. I mean, I have to go with Three Sides Live. And that is not, I'm just going to repeat exactly what you just said, because I'm in this exact agreement that that it's nothing. There's no patch on Seconds Out. Seconds Out is an amazing live record. I do listen to Three Sides Live more, and also I do think that it has something to do with, I'm going to say, it's the sentimental value of it as well, that it hit me at a time in my life when I was completely immersed in music, and I was completely immersed in Genesis. I just loved Genesis to death, and Abacab was like on my turntable like nonstop. And then this came out, and this was on my turntable nonstop. So to your point, I probably listened overall in my lifetime, I've listened more to Three Sides Live. So, and it's got my heart for some,
It's entirely likely that if you and I had been like 5 years older, we might have voted the other way.
Yes.
I absolutely see that, because I know people who are a little bit older than me that seconds out, it's like that's their holy grail when it comes to live Genesis. I
Yes.
totally get it, and I
Yes.
agree. In that regard, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
You
and I
know.
do miss Steve Hackett. I got to say, I do miss
Oh
Steve.
yeah, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. We haven't talked
Um,
to Daryl. I know sometimes Daryl could be um, controversial because of the reverence that people hold for Steve, but I love the way Daryl plays, and I think um, I think it may have taken me a little bit of time to get used to some of the choices he made, but he's just on fire,
he's an
man.
amazing player. Yeah, he's no slouch at
No,
all.
no, not in the least.
No. No.
So there's a trade-off. I mean, the 1982, 1981 Genesis band has a different groove than the 1977 band.
Exactly. That's
You
exactly
know,
right. Yep. Yep.
they've they've had 5 years, 4 to 5 years playing with Chester. They've had 4 or 5 more years as a live band touring the world, um,
Yes.
and
Yep.
the experience, Phil's confidence as a vocalist. I mean, there's so many things.
You're hitting on all of them. You're hitting on all the reasons. I think that this why this album is so good. This it's just like you said. They started in 1971. That by 1981 they were like 10 years in, and they had played a lot of live shows. And that like you said um that five-man lineup of Daryl and Chester and Phil, Mike, and Tony. Those five they had played, like you said, a lot of shows by that point. They were tight. They were
Yeah,
tight. Yeah.
they were definitely tight,
And
and
like you said, Phil's confidence level was up too because face value and all that. He was his confidence level was way up.
yeah, and I think because he was starting to assert himself as a composer, I think that had an effect as well. He'd done some co-writes on the early records, but Duke was the first time any of his own songs appeared anywhere, and it was probably the first time he'd spent any degree of time thinking, "Oh well, I want to write some songs. I'm feeling compelled to do this."
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
there's a lot to be said for that. You
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we could talk Genesis all night. As you can see, we could just keep going and going and going because I've enjoyed every minute of this. Oh my God, this has been great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad we got to do this, and I'm down for more whenever you want. So let
Let's
me know.
do it. Let's do it. No question. We're doing more of this. Um, but anyway, I hope you guys, if you stayed with us this long, we really appreciate you. You must be a huge Genesis fan. So thank you for sticking with us this long. If you like what you see, please hit like and subscribe. I got to say that. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you, it helps the channel. It just does. So I appreciate if you would do that down below. So anyway, thanks again, everybody. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time on Curless Mania. See you later.
There, see ya.